making another review video, and guess who's sitting right next with me? There he is, somewhere. What up? Okay.
What's happening?
No, little shout out. He's gonna watch it. He's gonna be quiet, and he's not gonna say anything.
3-3.
Shh. All right, so I'm doing this review for the quadratic test, and here's we go. That's a lot of words to start off this review, and I really don't like it, and I meant to change it. So what I want you to do is I want you to pull out a piece of paper, and you're going to take some notes. We're going to make this giant paragraph of nasty words go into not so much nasty words. All right, so what my plan was for this is I wanted to outline the steps for each method. So the first method we're going to talk about is the square root method. And I'm just going to give you the steps for solving the square root method. Well, let me make sure this is actually focused. Focus. Enhance. All right, square root method. Step 1 is I want to get my x squared term on the left and my numbers on the right. So for the square root method, I always want to get my x squared all the way on the left of the equal sign, and I want to get my numbers on the right of the equal sign. Step 2 is I want to get x squared by itself. Now this is one that everyone always forgets to do. They're like, oh, I have a square root over here, square root over here, bonk, square root it. But I can only do that if I have x squared by itself. And what I mean by x squared by itself is I have to not have like a 3 in front of it, a 2 in front of it. If I did have a 3 or 2 in front of it, I'd have to divide. All right, step 4, and I'll show you some examples of that later. Or sorry, step 3, I can't count. Ouch. Step 3, I take the square root of both sides. Now if you're like, Mr. Veenstra, why didn't you write square root? I did. Remember that this is the symbol for square root. Don't confuse the little 2, which is squaring something, with the symbol for square root. Right? So just to recap, I get x squared on the left, my numbers on the right. I get x squared by itself. I only want x squared, and then I take the square root of both sides. And really that's all you do for square root method. We'll see it here in just a minute. Alright, completing the square. That's another one of my methods. Completing the square. So I'm going to give you the steps to that. Completing the square. Completing the square. Alright, step 1, similar to square root method, but now I want to get all of my x's. So that's my x squareds and my x. I'll get all of my x's on the left, and I will get my number on the right. So it's very similar. I want to get all my x's on the left. That includes my x squared and my x. And I want to get my numbers on the right. All right, step 2. I actually complete the square. That's why this method is called this. I want to complete the square. And that's where I rewrite my equation. So I have, let's say, x squared plus 6x plus blank is equal, let's say, 5 and plus blank. You see how I got all my x squareds, sorry, my x terms on one side and my number on the other one? Then I complete the square by drawing the blank and the blank. And how do I figure out what goes in that blank? Well, I divide this number by 2 and I square it. Again, we'll see some examples of that later. I'm just giving you the steps right now. Step 3. Wow, I can't count today. I'm counting almost as bad as Coach Walker's jokes are. Oh! Come on, that was sort of funny. Alright, now I factor. Sorry, Coach Walker. I factor. I can factor this side, and I can add all these numbers together. So step 3 is I factor. And then step 4, I just take the square root of both sides. Right? I can take the square root of both sides, because by that point I have a perfect square on the left and a perfect square on the right. And this happens every single time. All these steps, every single time. I know we're getting to a lot of steps. Step 5, remember, I split it into my 2 equations. I can split into my 2 equations. So I'll have one that is equal to my positive answer and one that is equal to my negative answer, and I can solve from there. All right, that's completing the square. And my last method that we've learned, that we've actually been learning pretty recently, is my quadratic formula. And I'll say using the quadratic. Alright, so if I'm using the quadratic formula, step 1, always, standard form. I have to be in standard form, S-T-A-N-D-A-R-D. Always have to be into standard form. And that's where it's equal to 0. Alright, step 2, I find my A, my B, my C. And then I can plug those into my equation. So I'm going to call this all step 2. Plug into, we'll call it the formula, because that's what we always call it. Plug into my formula. And remember, if you forget, you don't have to memorize this formula. It's on your handy dandy formula sheet. Yes, sir, AJ.
I just raised my hand for no reason.
Oh, gosh, he just... Derp! Step 3 is I simplify and solve. Alright, so I plugged in all my letters, my numbers, and I get that big nasty formula. Well, I can simplify them, and we've been going over the steps for simplifying using your calculator. Really, if you can know the steps for all of these, this is all this test is over. This is all it's going to ask about, right? So if you wanted to memorize one thing, memorize these steps, because we're only going to ask you questions about these steps. But let's actually see these steps in examples. Alright, so we just took care of basically all of this. If you want to, you can go through and fill in these words into the blanks. It does exactly what I did in a lot less words. Alright, so first section we're going to do the square root method, just like I started off with my notes. So the square root method. First, let's start with the basics. Let's circle the perfect squares. Remember, perfect squares are something that I can multiply itself to get that. So what times what gets 4? 2. Good. So that one is a perfect square. Does something times something give 36? Yep. 6 and 6. X cubed. Well, I can do x times x to get x squared, but I can't have two things that multiply to give x cubed. So that one is not a perfect square. Is there something times something that gets 12? Well, I can do 3 times 4 is equal to 12, but those aren't the same things. So nope. What times what gets 1? This one's usually forgotten. Yes, AJ?
1.
1, yes. So I have 1 times 1. What times what gets 64? 8. So that one is one of them. And then y squared, I can do y times y. So that also is a perfect square. Alright, so now these, whoever made this didn't give the instructions. Gosh, Mr. Feenstra, you're so dumb. So we want to try and solve these. And we're going to try and solve them using the square root method. Now remember, my first step in the square root method, I want my x squared on the left and my number on the right. Good, I already have that. The second step, I want to get x squared by itself. I already have that. Then I take the square root of both sides. So I take the square root of this side, square root of this side. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 16 is 4. Now, if you put 4, get out of your chair and slap yourself in the face, because it is not 4. The square root of 16 is plus or minus 4. I promise you, you will see a question like this on the test. And if you get it wrong, I'm going to slap you in the face. Alright, next one. Remember, I want my x squared on one side, my number on the other side. So I need to get this number to the other side. I do that by adding 81. And I get x squared is equal to 81. Now if I want to get my x, I need to square root both sides. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 81 is, good, plus or minus 9. Alright, last one. I want to get my numbers on one side, my x squareds on the other side. Good. Well, now I don't have x squared by itself. What is with that x squared? A 3. And I need to get rid of that 3. I cannot square root both sides yet. Repeat after me. I cannot take the square root unless x squared is by itself. Good. So I divide by 3. Divide by 3. These cancel. X squared is then equal to 9. Now I can take the square root of both sides, because x squared is by itself. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. Again, if I'm going too fast for you, pause the video, rewatch it, and I'll say it again, because that's how technology works. Alrighty, this one. Alright, this one's a little different, but not as bad, right? I have a 2. And I have a 4 over here, this little 2. Well, how do I get rid of that 2? I square root it. And if I square root that side, I have to square root this side. So I'm left over with x minus 4, right? Because this basically cancels out that. And I have square root of 4 is plus or minus 2. So now I can go over here. I can split my equation into x minus 4 is equal to a positive 2. And x minus 4 is equal to negative 2. Notice how I didn't change what was going on in the middle. The middle thing stays the same. Don't change it. No. Don't. Alright, so I need to get x by itself, so I add 4, add 4, add 4, add 4. What is 2 plus 4? 6. So x is equal to 6. And then I have negative 2 plus 4, so x is equal to 2. And those are my two answers for that one. And you are now a master at square root method. Look, even Fetty Wap with his grainy face over here is happy. Yeah, baby. I'm the best at singing. Fetty, 1738. Yeah, I just dabbed. You didn't see it.
I did.
Oh, he did. Okay. Alright, now we're going to do completing the square. Our second method. Alright, well again, this is a lot of words. We'll just go through them. So we have to figure out what perfect square trinomials are first. We have to know about them. So how many terms are in a perfect square trinomial? Good. I have 3 terms. The last term has to be what? Has to be positive. So those are my first 2 rules. Has to have 3 terms, has to be positive. Now the blank and the blank term have to be perfect squares. Well, the first and the last term. Remember, the first term has to be a perfect square, and the last term has to be a perfect square. And then, if I divide my b term, my middle term, by 2, if I divide it by 2, and square it, I get the last term. Remember, that's how we actually complete the square. I take my middle term, my b term, divide it by 2, and square it, and I get my last term. So these are my perfect square trinomial rules, and we've talked about these. Well, let's see those rules in action. Number 8. So we know the rules. Which of the following are perfect square trinomials? Alright, so look at this first one. Are there 3 terms? Yes. Last term positive? Yes. What's the square root of x squared? X. What's the square root of 4? 2. Alright, well if I take my middle term, 4 divided by 2 is 2. What is 2 squared? 2 times 2. It's 4. So this is a perfect square trinomial. Alright, the next one. Are there 3 terms? Yes. Check. Is my last term positive? Oh no. It is not. So this one, put a big old X. This one, 3 terms. Check. Last term positive. Check. Square root of the first one, I can take that. Square root of the last term, yep, I get 5. Alright, well let's take 10 divided by 2. I get 5. What is 5 times 5? 25, and that's what I had here. So, yep, that also is 1. Alright, my last one is sort of tricky. Let's look at this. 3 terms, yep. Last term positive, yep. Square root of x squared, x. Square root of 12. Can I take the square root of 12 and get a nice number? No. I get a really gross number. Kind of like Caleb's face. Oh! 2-in-1 video. Crushing it. So, this is not a perfect square trinomial. Alright, cool. We're cruising. Alright, so now we want to find the missing terms. Well, we should probably just panic. No, don't panic. It's going to be okay. Alright, well, we already sort of went through it. Remember, if I want to find the last term, I take the middle term divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So I get 9. Same thing. If I have negative 4 divided by 2, I get negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. The last one, I'm going to tell you that it is 16. You have to do it by yourself. So pause the video right now, pause, and do it yourself. Alright, welcome back from the pause. Hope you had a great break. Hope you did wonderful things. Here we go. So now, I want to factor a perfect square trinomial. Well, this is pretty easy. If I'm factoring these, and you guys have gotten practice at this, well, what times what gets x squared? X. What times what gets 1? 1. And what sign goes in the middle here? Well, whatever sign is right there. So I put a plus. Good. This one, what times what gets x squared? X. What times what gets 36? 6. And then what sign goes in the middle? A minus. And I already gave you the parentheses in little 2. Just don't forget that when you're going through the process. Okay, number 11. So, I sort of led you through all of the steps. All of the steps you need to do for completing the square. So let's put all those steps together and try solving using completing the square. I didn't leave you enough room, so I'm going to do it on a separate piece of paper. So the first one I have is x squared plus 16x is equal to 17. 38. Now I got Betty stuck in my head.
Please meet your
Alexis.
ride at the front of the school.
Ugh.
Alexis Jackson, please meet your ride at the front of the school. Thank you.
Come on, Alexis.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Alright, so step 1, remember, for completing the square, get all my x's on the left, my number on the right. Good. X's on the left, number on the right. Now I want to complete the square, so I rewrite my equation, x squared plus 16x plus blank is equal to 17 plus blank. Well, remember, I led you through these steps. How do I figure out what goes in the blank? I divide 16 by 2. That's equal to 8. 8 times 8 is 64. So I have 64. 64. Alright. Now I factor it. That was step 3 in completing the square. I factor it. So what times what gets x squared? X. What sign goes in between here? A plus. And then what times what gets 64? Well, I have it right there. It's 8. Don't forget the little 2. And 17 plus 64 is 81. Alright, well, now I have this little 2. And remember, step 4 was to take the square root of both sides. Take the square root there, take the square root here. Alright, this gets rid of that. I have x plus 8 is equal to plus or minus 9. So now I can split this into my two equations. X plus 8 is equal to positive 9, and x plus 8 is equal to negative 9. And again, look how I'm not changing this middle term. I'm just changing the outside term. Alright, I want to get x by itself. I subtract 8, subtract 8, subtract 8, subtract 8. 9 minus 8 is 1. And then negative 9 minus negative 8 is negative 17. Oh yeah. It's like the Kool-Aid man. And these are my two answers. Word. Alright. These other two, I'm going to help you with them, but you're going to solve them on your own. So for this first one, remember, step 1, I want all my x's on one side and my numbers on the other side. Well, I see I have this number hanging out over here. I don't want to get him. I want to get him to the other side. Go on, get out of here, you little number. So if I want to get rid of this 7, I subtract 7. Subtract 7. I have x squared minus 8x is equal to negative 7. Then you can go through and repeat the same steps and solve that one. That's for you to do. Alright, well this one, remember I want my x's on one side, my number on this one. So I need to get rid of 24, add 24. These go away. I'm left with 2x squared plus 8x is equal to 24. But then remember, I want my x squared by itself. I can't have a number here. I always want x squared by itself. So how do I get rid of that 2? I divide by 2. I have to divide everywhere by 2. These cancel out, so I have x squared plus 4x, because 8 divided by 2 is 4, equals 24 divided by 2 is 12. And again, you can now go through and solve that one using completing the square. Alright, that's completing the square for you. Look, Steph Curry is flexing. Flexing hard because you made it this far. He's about it. Oh, get over it. Alright, last way we solve problems. Quadratic formula. That's the one we've been practicing, and a lot of you have been getting really good at this. So, standard form. Standard. Remember, I always want standard form if I'm solving using the quadratic formula. Remember, standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Always has to be equal to 0. Alright, so this one, is it equal to 0? Nope. So to get rid of this 9, I subtract 9, subtract 9. I can't combine this 9 with anything over here, so I just copy it all down. X squared plus 5x minus 9 is equal to 0. I'm in standard form. Check. Alright, this one. I'm not equal to 0, I'm equal to negative 7x. So if I want to get rid of a negative 7x, I add 7x, I add 7x. These cancel. Now remember, standard form always has the x squared, the x, the number. X squared, x, the number. X squared, x, the number. Yeah. X squared, the x, the number. What? I know, I'm so clever. So when I'm rewriting this down, I need the x squared, the x, then the number, and that's equal to 0. So make sure you're putting it in the right order, because if you're not, your brain's going to explode. Alright, now this one, I have 2 steps. So I want to get rid of the 3x first, minus 3x. This one I can combine because I have like terms. So I have x squared minus 8x, because minus 5 and a minus 3 combine to give me minus 8. That's equal to negative 5. Alright, well again, I want to get it equal to 0, so I add 5, add 5. So I have x squared minus 8x plus 5 is equal to 0. And that I am good with. Alright, well once I get into standard form, I have to find my a, my b, and my c. And I told you be careful with the second one. I actually tried to trick you in the second one. So be careful when we get to it. Alright, so my a for this first one is 4. My b for this first one is negative 5. Not positive 5, it's negative 5. And my c is 15. Gucci. Alright, my a for the next one, well, a is always with the x squared. My b, now look really carefully at that. Isn't that out of order? Isn't it supposed to be my x squared, then my x, then my number? So my b, remember, is the number that is with the x. b is with the x. So what number over here is with the x? The 6. Always check that to make sure that your b is with your 6. And then my c is 5. Alright, pretty easy. Now I actually want to use my quadratic formula. Here comes the fun. Alright, so again, first step, I list my a, my b, my c. My a is 1. My b is negative 4. And my c is 3. Okay, well remember, if you want to find that equation, you can go to your formula chart. And I remember that the equation is, I'll write it out to the side way over here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2 times a. That's my equation. Alright, so I'm going to use that equation here. X is equal to, I always put the negative, and then I put my b value. Right, and always use parentheses when you're plugging these in. So I have negative, which comes from the equation, negative, and then I have my b value, negative 4. So I have 2 negatives. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, again I put my parentheses, square it, minus 4 times a, again parentheses, times c. It's all divided by 2 times a. Alright, well you guys are used to simplifying this in the calculator. If I was, I'd plug everything, let me use a different color so you can see it, plug everything right here into the calculator and see what it comes out to. All of this stuff. Well, I'm going to do that in my head, because I'm smart. Negative 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 1 is 4, times 3 is 12. So I have 16 minus 12, which is 4. So I have, right, negative and negative make a positive, so I have positive 4 plus or minus the square root of, I said this was all 4, divided by 2 times 1 is 2. Alright, well I can split this into my 2 equations. 4 plus square root of 4 divided by 2, and 4 minus square root of 4 all divided by 2. And that I can plug into my calculator and solve. And I get, you should get, x is equal to 3 and x is equal to 1. This one I want you to try by yourself. All by yourself, like a real big boy or girl. Or whatever, if you're a monkey. Be a real big monkey. You can try that one on your own. And remember, it always has to be in standard form. So just like we were moving these into standard form, put it into standard form first. List out your A, B, and your C, and solve it from there. Alright, last one on this page. What if I want to work backwards? If I'm given this equation, and I want to work backwards to find what I was given. Alright, well, I need to find my A, my B, and my C. Alright, my A. My A is always on bottom in parentheses. So I always have 2 times A from my equation over here. 2 times A. So what is my A from this equation? It is 6. Alright, now my B. I always like looking right here for my B. Because usually my B is correct right there. I can usually tell what my B is. Well, I have 17 and 17 over there. So my B is 17. I would always start by looking right there to see what your B is. And then confirm over here. And my C is right here. It's the only time I use my C, and it is minus 12. So if I wanted to work backwards, put this in equation, remember I have A, x squared, plus bx, plus c is equal to 0. Well, I just replace these letters with these numbers. 6x squared plus 17x, and my c was minus 12. It's equal to 0. And that is my standard form. Ooh, almost done. One more page. I'm actually not going to do all of this. You haven't seen this yet. Don't worry about it. Done. Don't worry about it. You can cross that one out. Number 17, just seeing if you're paying attention, keeping you on your toes. If you read this, draw a big old smiley face. That's my smiley face. Dude, you've made it. You've finished all the things we've learned for this test. You just have to put it all together, decide what method to use. Queen Bay, that should be Queen B-A-Y. Not Bay isn't Bay. Queen Bay is all smiles. Don't make her frown by stopping now. Alright, last section. I want to decide which method to use. Alright, well I have my 3 methods that we've been going over and over and over again. Square root method, completing the square, quadratic formula. And remember, I can also factor. And factor is when I just have my factors and I can set them equal to 0. So which one would be the best? Well, for this first one, it's already factored for me. So why don't I just use factoring? This one. Well, look, I almost have an x squared by itself. Do you see how if I divided by 2 and divided by 2, I'd have an x squared by itself and a number over here? And which method can I use when I have an x squared by itself? The square root method. I'm going to do M for method. Alright, this one. Now this one's the trickiest one you can see. Because you have to look at it and try every method. Right, remember how this middle term, this is going to be middle term? I can't do completing the square because I can't divide an odd number, number 7, by 2 and get my completing the square. If you try and factor this as well, you'll see that you can't factor it either. So if I can't factor, I can't use completing the square, and I definitely can't do square root method because I don't have an x squared by itself. The only other one I can do is quadratic. Did I spell that wrong? Yeah, I spelled that real wrong. Quadratic formula. Alright, this one. I have x's on one side, number on the other side, and this is even. You see how if I divide 6 by 2, it's 3. 3 squared, I get 9. So I can complete the square with this one. I'm going to abbreviate it, complete the square, CTS. Alright, this one, I have a 2 over here. How do I get rid of those 2's? I square root them. So I can do square root method. And then finally this one, well, I have 11 with my x squared. Whenever I have a big number with my x squared, why not just use the quadratic formula? Ooh, voice crack. Going through puberty. Oopsie. I'm going to just use a quadratic formula, because I know the quadratic formula always works. It always works, no matter what. Okay. Last problem. I tried to make it somewhat fun. So Cam Newton's playing some b-ball. Not b-ball, f-ball, football. And Denver Bronco defensive football player comes to tackle him. Greg Olson, the tight end, is running down the field and has to pull off this beautiful catch. Cam throws the football, and some really smart person found out that the football travels based off of this equation, where t is how long the football is in the air. So this is sort of applicable to real life. I want to know how long the ball has been flying before Greg Olson catches it. So, the easiest way to solve this type of problem, use your calculator. I have 0 is equal to negative 16t squared plus 166t. Why not just plug this in my calculator? I'm going to plug this side into y1, this side into y2. And I'm going to go and I'm going to see on the graph where these two things meet. Remember, I'm going to press second, trace, and I'm going to find the intersection, so intersect. And I can actually find where time is equal to 0. Where he throws it, right? This is little old Cam Newton throwing the football. Whee! Even though he was garbage this season.
I was black.
Well, now he's blue. And so he throws the football, beep, 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 beep. And I want to know when he catches it right here. And so you're going to see on your graph, you're going to see this graph right here. You're going to see something like this. And I want to know where they meet right here. And you can do that by doing second trace intersect. And you'll find your answer. I don't remember it off the top of my head. Alright, kiddos. That's the review. Nothing much more to it. Watch it over and over again. Play it while you fall asleep. I don't know if you weird kids do that, but I wouldn't, because that's super nerdy. But at least watch it, listen to it again, so that you can get 100 on the test. This is Mr. V, and again, he's still here. AJ is somewhere over there. There he is. Yeah. We're done.